My diet as a kid consisted of all the greats. You know the ones I'm talking about: the microwavable chicken nuggets, Chef Boyardee dinosaurs with meatballs, Kraft Macaroni and Cheese, Hungry Man Salisbury steak TV dinners, pasta, Twinkies, and ding-dongs. Of course, in the later hours of watching my favorite TV shows, there was always microwave popcorn with extra butter. As a child, it was pure bliss, but looking back, my stomach turns as I create this list. As I got older, the unhealthy chemical foods continued. In my first year at high school, we had open lunches. Luckily for me, there was a McDonald's right across the street, so my friends and I would happily walk over to order the same meal every day. With all these high carb and sugary foods, at least I was taking karate, which helped burn some of it off. However, by the time I was in college, I was living a very sedentary lifestyle. I chose not to work out in college because I was a pretty thin college kid, so exercising would burn more calories, which would make me lose weight. At least that was my rational thinking back then. I knew I was unhealthy, but damn, I felt great. I remember actually bragging about how unhealthy I lived and said I would deal with it when the time came. Well, that time came much sooner than I thought it would. I remember the very first time I lost control of my body. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. I wasn't just hit with the common cold, or even the flu that put me in bed for days. No, something was very wrong and I didn't know what it was, or what to do. Even looking back years later, I can remember every detail. I was sitting down at the kitchen table while eating some pasta, and all of a sudden I felt extremely dizzy. How could I be dizzy, I thought. I was literally in the middle of eating. I wasn't just lightheaded. As I felt dizzy, I put the fork down and sat back in my chair, frozen with fear. When I regained my senses, I immediately told my mom, who suggested that I see a doctor. And so it began. I can still hear the doctor's questions. "Well, sir, how can I help you today? What are your symptoms?" I recounted the scene to him. This was always the worst part for me, trying to describe what I felt with a bunch of vague feelings. Oftentimes, I felt like I needed to actually look sick in the office for the doctor to take me seriously, even though at the moment I felt relatively fine. The answer was always blood work to see what was going on. Most of the time the tests came back fairly normal, with the exception of my white blood cell count being low, as well as low vitamin D, low thyroid TSH, and high testosterone. As time went on, I became quite knowledgeable from the tests as I studied my own blood work. I did this because I knew I'd need to explain myself when visiting different specialists. Speaking of specialists, what a perfect system that allows doctors to point fingers and give you the runaround. Before I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, none of my doctors knew what was going on inside my body. At first, I thought I was hypoglycemic. Then I thought I had parasites. Then it was candida. One doctor even wanted to put me on psychiatric medication, saying it was all in my head. By this time, I began developing complications, experiencing shortness of breath, heart palpitations, dizziness, pain in my gallbladder, and loss of appetite, while at the same time feeling extreme hunger, low sex drive, pain in my intestines accompanied by diarrhea. With all this going on, I felt as though I'd never get a solid solution to my problems. I remember speaking to one of my cardiologists as I expressed my concern regarding the shortness of breath and heaviness in my chest. His response was that I needed to see a lung specialist and that I probably had asthma. To him, I was asking for something that was outside of his area of expertise. He was a heart specialist and had nothing to do with my symptoms, or so he said. Knowing he was wrong and completely unhelpful, I decided to see the lung specialist anyway, just in case. I was willing to see anyone with an answer at this point. But when the lung specialist prescribed me an inhaler, I knew I was wasting my time. This is unfortunately the state of our healthcare system. Everyone is divided up with specific knowledge. Patients are sent from doctor to doctor to doctor to specialist to doctor to another specialist again. These doctors are not in communication with each other to help solve the problem. As a result, the patient suffers and no real solution is found, all while racking up a hefty medical bill. What Western medicine has somehow forgotten is that the body is connected. The heart affects the lungs, which affects your oxygen level and circulation, which affects the blood, which affects the lymph nodes, which affects the liver, which affects the digestive system, which affects the colon, which affects your stool and everything else in between. Which, of course, all of this, affects how you feel. It breaks my heart seeing people in the waiting room who I imagine can tell of a similar frustrating story. Yet this is considered normal. This experience changed my life. I realized I was not invincible and that my body will not last forever. It's something none of us really want to confront or think about, especially at such a young age. Making peace with the aging process is something I work on even to this day. When you're young, you can't wait to get older so you can do all the things you dream of doing. Yet the reverse is true as well, because when you're older, you wish you were younger because you might not have been able to experience everything you wanted and wished you had more time. The lesson to be learned here is that no matter what stage of life you are in, take full advantage of the time you have. Go talk to that girl, start that business, write that book, go backpacking across Europe, think outside the box, and pursue your passions. Do not be afraid to take risks. For it is better to experience rejection, learn, and grow from that experience than it is to live with regret.